The aluminum we produce has a great role in people's lives, in society, and the environment. We know that to offer solutions with aluminum that transform lives, we need to go beyond. Think about the future. And to us, the future is made out of aluminum. That's why we created Alenium, the CBA seal for sustainable aluminum. This seal identifies our aluminum that's low carbon. Alenium is our commitment to contribute towards a more sustainable world for everyone and for the next millennium. After all, when sustainability is part of who we are, everything seems to be connected and we can build a new reality to belong. Alenium, the seal for the new millennium. Good morning. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another edition of the CBA Dialogues. This is an annual meeting we organize to present and debate initiatives that conduct us towards achieving our ESG strategy objectives for 2030 in the company. I'm Sonia Consiglio, a presenter and mediator for this event, and also a member of the Sustainability Committee at CBA. I'm white, medium height, curly hair, and I'm wearing a blue blazer. Our session is taking place in a studio in the city of São Paulo and broadcasted by internet to different locations. If you can't watch live, we will provide a link with the presentations as soon as we finish this broadcast. The presentations will take place in Portuguese, but one of our guests will be presenting in English. If you need translation to any of these languages, there's a channel for translation on our platform. Besides this, we also have a file with the presentations in English. To access, please click on the link in the chat. Today, our topic for CBA Dialogues is decarbonization, more precisely the mitigation and adaptation measures to climate change that CBA performs that provide our ambitious target of reducing 40% of our greenhouse gas emissions in our casted aluminum. We know that we can achieve this goal based on the results CBA has been achieving amidst the challenges placed by the climate changes. I don't want to anticipate or give you a spoiler of what will be presented, but I can say that all of the results we've achieved are already significant, and these initiatives have been standing out in the whole world. And this makes us very proud here in Brazil. Now, quickly going over the agenda for this session, we'll have an opening speech with the CEO at CBA, Luciano Alves, and he's going to introduce a bit of the context of our business and give us some updates on the ESG strategy at CBA. Soon after, we'll get to know the performance of the climate agenda at CBA with Leandro Faria, our General Manager for Sustainability. And finally, we'll have a presentation by Miles Prosser from the International Aluminium Institute, providing a perspective on the global demand and the role of low-carbon aluminum. After this presentation, we'll start with Q&A as you are watching us online. To send your questions, please use the tool with the chat on our broadcast platform. And now to open up this session, I'll invite our CEO at CBA, Luciano Alves. Welcome, Luciano. Hello, Sonia. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Luciano. I'm a white man, cis, heterosexual. I'm wearing a dark blue outfit, and it's a great honor to be with you guys here in one more ESG dialogue. It's my first dialogue as a CEO at CBA, and there's a lot to discuss, a lot of content to go over, but we want to have our chat session also with Q&A at the end. That's the most important for us. And I want to start off by discussing CBA a bit, and our main purpose is to offer aluminum solutions that can transform lives. We've been holding on to this purpose for quite a while, and this is what guides all of our initiatives at CBA ever since we developed it. And along with this, we have a goal, which is also an important pillar of our strategy, which is consolidating our position as a benchmark when it comes to ESG. And so that's why we're going to be here discussing this topic today. There's a lot of interesting discussions. CBA is already a low-carbon aluminum producer where our footprint is 3.03 tons of CO2 for every ton of aluminum produced. We're in the first quartile of the emissions curve in the global industry for aluminum. And it's interesting because last year we launched a seal the Millennium Seal that you can see on our screen. And actually this certifies this level of issuance of emissions of carbon. And what's most interesting is that this seal can be used by our customers and their customers of their customers, and they can use this on their packaging as well to certify the content and the carbon footprint of that kind of aluminum included in that product. This QR code you can see on the screen gives you access to all of the information regarding our product, and you can access this and get a little more info as well. So we have a strategy for ESG that's already been developed over quite a while, till 2030, with lots of goals. And we've always been evolving in this strategy. So we have 10 different programs, 10 different levers, that are split into 15 programs and 33 targets. And last year we developed a bit more of this strategy, and we included an additional program, which is program number 2 that you can see in the environmental pillar for renewable energy. Besides this, we included another 3 additional targets for 2030 that complement and contribute to our strategy. Once again, you can also access the QR code on this slide, and you can access our annual report for 2022, where we have details of the strategy and the targets and all the initiatives that we've been working on in regards to this topic. So just to give an example, all of the executives that have variable compensation at CBA have a target connected to ESG. This target, of course, each one has their own contribution individually to the company's targets or some ESG target in the company. And from top management, we also have a consolidated calculation to reach the targets in the entire organization, so that we can ensure an alignment with the entire organization that's in line with the targets set for CBA. As Sonia mentioned, at the event today, we're going to talk about decarbonization. So that's why we highlighted it in green, lever 1 with climate change, and program 1 as well for mitigation and climate adaptation. And this is what we're going to discuss during the rest of this presentation today. But before we get into details, I'm also going to show you a bit of our evolution in certificates, certifications, ESG ratings. We've already talked about this quite a bit, but it's nothing new to you. But last year we also received a lot of new achievements in this topic. So the first year as a publicly held company on B3 in Brazil, and we got into the 3 B3 indexes for sustainability: EASY, ICO2, and GP2W. And EASY, it's the first year we got into B3, and we already are in 5th place in this index. And then when we look at the global ratings, it's interesting to take a look at on CDP and MSI, 2 important achievements at CBA. So at CDP, we were A- in 2021, and now we're rating A in 2022. And then it's the first primary aluminum company in the world that is listed in the A category. And along with this, it's also we're also the first company for primary aluminum production in the world that has its targets approved by the science-based targets. You can see on the bottom part of the slide. And on MSIA, we were rating A, but now we are rating AA last year. And this also proves our evolution in the entire topic within CBA. We're also a reference when it comes to leadership in MSIA. And last month we had an award for the best in ESG from Izami. And this year we're in 1st place, also in the mining and steelwork and metalwork category. So this makes us really proud because of what we do for CBA, but also as an example to the overall market. And we're always searching for this, and we'll always try to evolve in CBA when it comes to this. So to give you an overall panorama, especially when it comes to the emissions process, we brought in some information about the entire industry and not only aluminum to give you some context on where we are. So when we take a look at global emissions, it's interesting to see that industry and energy generation, almost 60% of the CO2 emissions in the world. And aluminum is a parcel of the industry, and aluminum represents about 2% of the global emissions. So within the aluminum industry, you can see on the right side that we have an important contribution of renewable energy, which is the case with CBA, but there's also a significant amount of manufacturers and producers using thermal energy and coal generation. So 67% of the industry produces aluminum with non-renewable energy, and from the 56% that use thermal energy through coal production. So specifically in China, It's a little less than 60% of the worldwide production of aluminum. And in their case, they represent about 75% of their energy matrix, also coming from coal thermal energy sources. So it's important to mention that if the aluminum industry evolves and develops to have a more renewable energy matrix, a significant part of the emissions we currently have will be dropping, and we'll have an even smaller parcel in the overall industry. And that's an important trend for the industry, aluminum industry, when they really need to change their energy matrix. So now specifically about CBA, we have a emissions performance that's better in almost all of the phases in the productive chain. We consider the four main phases: mining, refinery, electrolysis, and casting. And electrolysis, that's where we produce the liquid aluminum. So that's the most intensive part when it comes to energy consumption for the production. This is where we have a differential that's even more significant. And of course, because of the fact that we have renewable energy, 100% renewable, and with wind power generation and hydropower generation, and we have our emissions of 3.03.
So it's like way less compared to those aluminum peeps who get coal from heat energy. This is one big reason why CBA is doing better with emissions. On top of that, if you take a look at how we make stuff, we're doing all these cool things to shrink our carbon footprint by 2030. We want to cut our emissions by 40% from 2019 to 2030. We're totally on track to nail this goal. One thing we're doing, or one way we're going to make it happen, is using more recycled stuff in our products. As for the market, it's not just us trying to do this. Pretty much everyone in the aluminum biz wants to use more recycled stuff. There are a bunch of reasons for this, not just the emissions or the carbon footprint,
but also because in recycled aluminum, you also have greater energy efficiency. So you consume about 95% less electric power than what you would be consuming if you were producing primary aluminum. So you can see the recycled aluminum has a very low carbon footprint, about 0.6 times tons of CO2 for each ton of aluminum, versus hydropower plants or renewable energy sources, which are about 2.5 or 2.6. So the world is really searching for higher recyclable content to reduce emissions, but also to have the best energy efficiency. And aluminum is a metal that can be infinitely recycled. So, of course, without losing its properties. And we think this is feasible and something that's even incentivized for this kind of sector. And on the right side, you see our customers and productive chains. What's interesting to see with aluminum is that, first of all, you have a bigger demand for recycled content, but also lower carbon footprint products, and aluminum fits in very well. So aluminum, we provide products to different productive chains. We don't depend on a single supply chain, so we can offer products to different supply chains, and each supply chain has an interest or a specific advantage with aluminum. I'll mention some cases. We had some examples of cases where you have companies and sectors that have already been trying to have targets for emission reduction and also carbon neutrality by 2050 or some date in the future. And when we think about the packaging sector and the food and beverage sector, it's natural that you'll have aluminum come in to preserve food or beverages better through the packaging. But since aluminum is infinitely recyclable and you can recycle aluminum easily, compared to other materials, it does have this additional advantage. And when it comes to the auto sector, there's the lightness of aluminum, which is super important, especially when we think about electric vehicles or the evolution of the overall automotive market. But there's also resistance, flexibility, and the fact that aluminum can be used in different alloys that have different properties or characteristics to offer alternatives or options for the OEMs. So when we consider civil construction, durability is also very important. The aluminum has a longer resistance, and not only the lightness and the low carbon footprint, but this resistance is used in this supply chain. And when it comes to electric power, what we see is not only the power transmission capacity that aluminum has, but also the fact that it's a light metal. It's really used for transmission lines. And when we think about the future with a world that has more renewable energy, wind power that consumes a lot of aluminum and its production and generation, and also more transmission lines for electric power in the world, you'll have greater consumption of aluminum for natural reasons. So just to give an example of how the market's evolving and how how the market's been searching for an increase of this content to the products, and why is it so important for CBA to have the recycling and the recyclable content of our products? Well, first, the demand I just mentioned from different segments and different industries around the world. Naturally, this leads us to search for this recyclable content or a greater share of recyclable aluminum in our mix. Recyclable aluminum has the strengthening of CBA's positioning as a low carbon footprint aluminum producer. So we're already in the first quartile with a low carbon footprint. But with higher content, we'll have a even lower recyclable, even lower footprint. But we can have more stable, predictable margins because within CBA's process, which is kind of commodity or placing recyclable segment that has a more stable margin, it's very important to balance the risk return ratio in our portfolio at CBA, which is why we search for more investments in recycling. In the company, we've also been able to grow our volumes with lower capital intensity than if we were to expand with more primary aluminum capacity. That's why we see a big opportunity to develop our activities in this sector. And we also have some other initiatives and projects, but there's a lot more we're going to be searching for in the future. Just some examples. We acquired Alex last year, a recycling business that's focused in the automotive sector that produces secondary alloys. So we entered this new segment for the automotive sector. We also had a sidewall oven supplied, and together with this, we also had a separation line for cleaning and scraps that will allow Metalex to increase the recyclable content in its products and reach about 80% of the recyclable content in the future. And finally, the real project, which is interesting because we developed a patent together with customers, and we can recycle the multi-layer package, which is very complex to recycle. And with this project, we can also access a recycling market we hadn't been accessing before, which is the multi-material package market. So these are just some initiatives that are part of our day-to-day and things that we're going to be searching for, but really make a big difference to CBA in the overall market. So this is what I wanted to share with you today. Once again, thank you so much for your participation, and we'll be available for a chat session later on in the Q&A session. And I'll move on here with this event and call Sonia to continue. Thank you, Luciano. And in just a bit, Luciano will be back with us. Luciano, of course, besides all of the data that's so relevant in the sector and the industry and CBA, I want to highlight the institutional aspect and the importance to establish targets at a leadership level, guaranteeing the alignment with this agenda, and of course, all of the participation in sustainability indexes, recognition, acknowledgement, which gives the company the credibility. And this is what all of the stakeholders expect. So, moving on with our next part, we are talking about the mitigation to climate change at CBA, which intends to reduce by 40% the greenhouse gas emissions by 2030 in the productive process for aluminum. But of course, this is because CBA is committed to low carbon aluminum supply with sustainable technologies that can influence the entire value chain for aluminum. This includes activities for development as well with the communities where CBA is present in different initiatives. This is fundamental. So, the social aspects. To give us more details about what was already achieved and present the performance of the climate agenda at CBA, I would like to invite the General Manager for Sustainability, Leandro Faria. Please, Leandro. Good morning, Sonia. Thank you so much, and it's an honor to have you with us in this dialogue. As Sonia has already mentioned, good morning, everyone. I am Leandro. I'm the General Manager for Sustainability at CBA. And it's a great honor to be with you guys today talking about a topic that is so relevant and strategic for our company, which is the climate agenda performance. So before we get into this topic, I want to have my audio description. I'm a man, I'm cis, medium height. I have gray hair. I also use a beard, and I'm wearing a black suit, a white shirt. And behind me, there's an image of the Atlantic forest representing our private area called the Legado das Águas, where CBA is the founder and maintainer, or which is managed by Reservas Votorantim, a company in the Votorantim group. So moving on, when we get into the climate agenda topic, I would like to highlight that all of these results presented by Luciano and the results I'll be presenting soon after, as well as the commitments and ratings, are only possible because we have very robust governance. And this governance is pioneering with a sustainability committee that advises the board. And this committee includes independent members with a lot of experience. And also in the ESG aspects. And of course, this includes our prior CEO, Ricardo Carvalho, as an independent member, supporting us and helping us to advance even more in our sustainability agenda. And so this committee is where we make decisions or think strategically about risks and opportunities from a short, medium, and long term. We also have other committees that support the management, which are more focused on a specific agenda that's part of our strategy, such as the Sustainable Supplies Committee, Water Resilience Committee, and then the Climate Change Committee as well that we recently created, which has multidisciplinary team from technology, sustainability, engineering, energy efficiency backgrounds, and members that are part of some sectors that in some way generate greenhouse gas emissions. And in this committee, we provide the strategic aspects with a bit of a tactile approach. And this leads to the results we can see here, where we can measure and correct initiatives and actions so that we can really achieve those 33 targets that are so important. And in this committee specifically, we have five goals or targets. We're going to talk about decarbonization. And our program for this strategy that is responsible for this is what we call the Climate Adaptation and Mitigation Program. We have five targets, and I'm going to cover them in the next slides, but I just want to highlight one of them, which is reducing by 40% the emissions from our overall aluminum production, from the mining all the way to the casting phases. So, a very ambitious goal. Although we have had significant results compared to other peers globally for aluminum production. As I mentioned, our target has the objective of reducing 40% of the intensity in scope 1 and scope 2 from mining to casting. And in 2019, our results were 4.02 tons of CO2 per ton of aluminum produced. We want to reach 2030 by 245 tons of CO2 per ton of aluminum produced. And up until now, we've already reduced 26% of the 40 that have been planned. So we know where we are, where we want to achieve, and exactly how we've been setting this path. The results in 2022 are 297, which is better than what was expected, and 348. So why was this possible? Because we've been working in four different initiatives for greenhouse gas emission reduction. So diversifying our uh, energy matrix, the use of biomass, the use of technologies as another example, with a modernization of the hot pot lines, and also the maintenance of renewable energy, especially electric power that's 100% renewable. So the next slides will cover two processes. One is the alumina refinery that's here on the screen, and the next one will be the liquid aluminum and the smelter. These two processes are very important because together they add up to almost 90% of all of the emissions in the primary aluminum production for scope 1 and 2. And in the alumina refinery, our results are 0.23, which positions us as the refinery with the least carbon emissions in the world, according to Crew consulting firm, which is very acknowledged around the world. So, if we compare with other peers in the aluminum dioxide production peers, the average was 2 tons of CO2 per ton of aluminum produced, and the intention for this or the pathway for this decarbonization in the refineries around the world is that we'll reach between 2045 2048 with a result that's close to 0.02. So the future of these are already a present reality in CBA. This was only possible because we were able to diversify the energy matrix that used to use natural gas and oil, and we substituted this by the use of biomass from eucalyptus from reforestation areas. So this led to a reduction of 60% in this path. So the second carbon intensive process is the phase with the liquid aluminum production or the smelters. So then once again, here we have a significant result when comparing with the rest of the world. Um, so the average globally is 12.8, and our results were 3.03. So 4 times lower than the average worldwide, which positions us once again as a pioneer in the first quartile for emissions. So in practical terms, CBA has been producing aluminum that really contributes to decarbonization, and they're using using CBA's aluminum is an important lever from a decarbonization perspective. The third pillar that we already mentioned with Luciano is recycling. So we've been investing a lot in this agenda. Recently, we acquired Alex, and Alex combines a real high percentage of recycling with the consumption of renewable energy, and so our results are 0.4 tons of CO2 produced in this unit that's exclusive for recycling products, as well as that Metalex, another exclusive unit for recycled products, and our results were in 2022 2.02 tons of CO2 per ton of billets. So this was already mentioned by Luciana, but I wanted to highlight that we are investing to increase the capacity of recycling at CBA by 60% to 80%, and also expand our capacity, as was already mentioned, from 75 uh, thousand tons per year. At Alex, our capacity is 46,000 tons. Recycling is not only a lever for CBA, but it's an important lever for decarbonization in the overall sector. So this has been an important process. So this uses 5% of the energy responsible using the same volume of aluminum. So recycling eliminates the two prior processes at the refinery and the smelters. So this is fantastic from a emissions perspective. So all of these results are only possible because we have a matrix that's mainly renewable. 82% of our energy matrix comes from renewable sources and 18% from non-renewable sources, as well as the use of natural gas. And so in this percent, we include electric power, um, and this is 100% renewable and trackable. And it's important to mention that um, and they go through an independent audit. And so the renewable energy, we have 26 hydropower plants and 2 wind power plants. And although most of our matrix is renewable, we do have a committee that intends to optimize or promote greater efficiency in our processes. We have short, mid, and long term initiatives. And last year we had 3 different areas: compressed air with a production capacity of up to 5 megawatts. And we want to improve The second target is really to define a neutralization path. So most of these initiatives are part of 40% approximately of our path towards becoming carbon neutral. If we were to consider all of these advances with biomass boilers, the use of scraps, etc. But there's still a path of about 50% approximately that uh, we don't have the technical feasibility or commercial feasibility at this moment, such as a technology which is the inert anode, which has been developed throughout the years. But of course, CBA has been keeping their eyes open, and as soon as it's possible to have another solution in the overall aluminum sector and for CBA as well, we will start assessing this implementation, and this could be responsible for over 40% of the reductions in the primary aluminum production. So, another technology which is capturing, stocking, and utilization of carbon with a big potential. Which is even higher than the 6%, that's considered pretty conservative. So over the next years, this technology needs to be feasible from a regulatory perspective and technological perspective. And as soon as possible, we will also assess its deployment. And finally, we're still going to be missing one part that we plan to use some carbon credits to offset our emissions, and this is interacting with a next target, which is producing a carbon neutral product line with the use of carbon credits that CBA has been working towards making a reality. So, through two projects for carbon credit generation, which is the deforestation that was avoided, the Red Plus for Cerrado project, which was developed by CBA together with Reservas Votorantim. This was developed at the Green Cerrado Legacy, another private preservation area that belongs to CBA and is managed by the Votorantim Reservas, which created and established this project that delivers carbon credits that are super um, reliable. And we have already performed about 316,000 carbon credits that can be used to offset some kind of product lines if customers are interested in such. And of course, besides the offsetting or neutralization, we can also reinvest in the protection of the biodiversity of the Cerrado region. Then we have the reforestation project that is not related to avoided reforestation. It's called Hiflada, but it intends to reforest areas that are from small farmers or rural producers. So it's a project that, besides the carbon credit generation possibility, it also delivers other positive impacts, such as the law rights and formalization, creating some ecological corridors, maintenance of water flows and water preservation processes, as well as other aspects that are very much connected to the social and environmental agenda. So we've scaled this up to another 32 cities in the surrounding area, and throughout the next years, we'll have the advances in the reforestation. So besides this, we have the last two targets connected to the climate strategy, which is defining this plan for adapting to climate change. CBA has already developed a plan that assesses and evaluates the risks and climate opportunities that are integrated into our risk process from a corporate perspective, with the robustness that's very significant based on the best methodologies for risk identification. We've also adopted the report through TCFD, which I'm going to explain a little better, which intends to map out risks and opportunities. Millennium, which was the first video we shared in our dialogue today, was an example of opportunities in the carbon agenda. So the second target is support for this process. And we know that the municipalities have been facing situations that are caused by this climate change, and we can help and support them in mitigating and adapting to these situations. And we're developing this project together with the Votorantim Institute, and we'll be deploying it throughout the next years. And last but not least, I would like to let you know that today we are very honored to launch our TCFD report. This is in line with the financial market lingo that identifies risks and opportunities. And I want to invite you all to come and access this report where you can see the QR code and view the report directly. And so that you can also see our climate agenda and contribute to this path. So I want to thank you so much for your presence. It was a pleasure to be here with you presenting our climate performance. And now I am very honored to invite our next speaker, Miles. He's the General Secretary of the International Institute for Aluminum. Miles, thank you so much for your presence today with us. Miles will be speaking about the global aluminum demand and how aluminum can become a sustainable solution for a more sustainable future. Miles, the floor is yours. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Leandro, and it's a pleasure to be talking to you, and my thanks to everyone at CBA. I'm talking today from our office here in London, and I'm from the International Aluminium Institute. So we're the, sorry, I think there's some slides of mine too, if the slides can pop up on the screen. Moving on to the next slide. So we're the peak body for the global aluminium industry, and we've been in existence for almost 50 years. When we were first established, we were established to collect and publish industry statistics, such as production, and collaborate on environmental issues. We can move to the next slide, please. In many ways, the sort of work we do hasn't changed markedly, though we now collect, analyse and publish data on a wide range of metrics, including greenhouse gases, energy, sustainability metrics, demand forecasts, and future industry scenarios. And we now also foster collaboration across a whole range of sustainability and promotional issues. If we can move forward a couple of slides, please. So what I'll talk through today are some issues around aluminium demand and sustainability, some of the components of sustainability, and low carbon pathways and demand for low carbon aluminium. Just moving forward 2 slides, please. And that's it. Lovely. Thank you. So society is increasing focus on sustainability as a key issue. And that's a positive thing for aluminium because aluminium provides a sustainability solution to some of the key issues. We're seeing it used in renewable energy. We're seeing it used increasingly in motor vehicles as part of the transition to electric vehicles. And we're seeing it seen as one of the sustainable solutions for food and drink packaging. So it's an important benefit for our industry that an increased focus on sustainability is driving an increased demand for aluminium. Moving to the next slide. And that's not because of any particular marketing campaign done by the aluminium industry, but it's because of the basic properties of the material itself. So in the automotive market, it's the lightweight and formability of aluminium that provides an advantage over steel. Aluminium's conductive qualities mean it can be used in electrical applications, with a lower weight sees it favoured over copper in many applications. In food and drink packaging, aluminium's protective barrier properties, combined again with a lightweight, are seeing it increasingly favoured by consumers, particularly in response to concerns over single-use plastics. And in building and construction markets, the durable nature of aluminium sees it favoured when consideration is given to the cost of maintenance of building and the lifetime cost of buildings. And in all of those markets, the most significant benefit of using aluminium is the recyclability. Aluminium already has high recycling rates, particularly in Brazil, and is more readily recycled than competing materials at a lower cost and with no reduction in the properties of aluminium. Moving to the next slide, please. So about 18 months ago, we commissioned a report from CRU, the analysts who were referenced earlier, and we asked them to look at projected increases in demand for aluminium through to 2030. And that report found some positive conclusions for aluminium. In some of the key markets, such as transport, electrical, packaging and consumer durables, we're expecting to see annual growth rates of more than 4% in the marketplace, and that those growth rates will be sustained for over a decade. By 2030, the total increase in demand for aluminium is expected to be an extra 33 million tonnes, and that's an increase of nearly 40% of the consumption rates in 2020. Next slide, please. One of the important conclusions of that report is that in 3 of the 4 biggest markets, the growth is going to be driven by sustainability issues. So in the transportation market, That's driven by the movement towards electric vehicles as motor vehicles become more sustainable. In the electrical market, it's been driven by the investment in renewable energy and the infrastructure needed to deliver that energy to consumers. And in packaging, it's being delivered by concerns around the use of plastics, and particularly single-use plastics, and an increase from consumers in using packaging materials with greater rates of sustainability and recyclability. Next slide, please. So taking some of those markets in turn, looking first at the automotive market. For conventional vehicles, aluminium has always enabled better fuel efficiency, hence lower greenhouse gas emissions by providing lower weight vehicles. However, in the shift to electric vehicles, the weight becomes even more important due to the inescapable weight of the battery. And the marketability of electric vehicles is principally around the vehicle range and performance. So aluminium becomes the means that manufacturers can make their vehicles lighter, therefore making them go further and performing better, as well as making them safer. So in this data that comes from the Aluminum Association in the US and Ducker Frontier Consultants, we can see that a typical battery electric vehicle uses more aluminium than a conventional internal combustion engine vehicle. And even as those vehicles become more efficient in the future, there'll still be higher rates of aluminium use than has been the case historically. So this shift to electric vehicles will actually drive increased demand for aluminium. The next slide, please. Turning now to the electricity market, we can all probably understand that increased investment in solar electricity generation will increase aluminium demand, as solar panels have a higher level of aluminium use than other forms of electricity generation. But extra renewable electricity generation will also require investments in the grids to deliver that electricity to consumers. And that's going to drive an increase in demand for both aluminium and copper. The data on this slide comes from the International Energy Agency and their World Energy Outlook that was looking at what the transition to clean energy would do in driving demand for increased materials. And they predict a substantial increase in demand for both copper and aluminium, and each of those will be favoured by their particular properties, with aluminium typically used where weight is important, such as in overhead cabling. Next slide, please. The last of the three key markets driven by sustainability is in food and drink packaging. And this is best exemplified by the beverage can market. So the competition here is in plastic, which dominates the market, and also with glass. So aluminium has a small proportion of that market, but aluminium cans are actually, at a global scale, more than 2 out of 3 aluminium cans are recycled, although in Brazil that is a much higher rate. With an opposition to the use of single-use plastics and a concern about plastic waste, there's an opportunity for aluminium to increase its market share in this area. Next slide, please. So we conducted some work to look at the circularity case for each of those three materials. So aluminium is shown in the top of this chart, glass in the middle, and plastic at the bottom. And what the work shows is that aluminium has higher performance in recycling on all of the key metrics compared to either glass or plastic. That is, more aluminium is collected for recycling. More of what we collect is able to be used for recycling because of lower losses in the recycling process. More of what we recycle goes into other uses that themselves can be recycled, creating the potential for an infinite loop. And more of what we recycle goes back into the same use. For example, an aluminium beverage can collected and recycled back into an aluminium beverage can. So as society becomes more concerned about recycling rates and circularity, there'll be a stronger case for aluminium to compete against both plastic and glass in these markets. Next slide, please. So if the increased demand for aluminium comes from a focus on sustainability, there's also going to be obligations and opportunities on the supply side to meet sustainability expectations. So if customers want aluminium because it's a more sustainable alternative, they will want that aluminium to be produced sustainably, which raises the question as to what constitutes sustainable production of aluminium. We undertook a project that used the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals as a framework to assess our industry and identify the key issues. And the 6 key issues are identified here. 2 of those are issues that we often talk about in relation to aluminium. That's climate change impacts and circularity. While the other 4 issues, water, emissions and waste, people and biodiversity are perhaps less high profile, but if not managed well, could create reputational issues for the material or for a particular producer. Next slide, please. So the most scrutinised issue, and arguably the most important one, is the climate change challenge. So as noted by one of the earlier speakers, aluminium currently accounts for about 2% of global emissions. That's about 1.1 billion tonnes of carbon dioxide equivalent per year. That's made up of about 700 million tonnes based on electricity emissions. And again, as noted earlier, that depends largely on the electricity source used for aluminium smelting, with hydro producers such as CBA producing at a much lower rate of carbon emissions. There are also emissions associated with the direct process and thermal heat used in alumina refining, as well as emissions associated with ancillary and transport. The challenge for our industry will be to find ways that we can reduce those global emissions by more than 80%, at the same time that demand for aluminium as a material is forecast to grow by 70%. So we need to decouple growth in aluminium demand from growth in greenhouse gas emissions. Next slide, please. So as part of our work, we developed pathways to define the trajectory, the technology, and the investment needed to meet global climate change goals. So those pathways include a business as usual pathway, and then two pathways derived from work of the International Energy Agency about the emissions reductions needed by the aluminium industry. And those two pathways, the beyond 2 degrees scenario and the 1.5 degree scenario. And both have a shape similar to the one shown on the graph here. There are two key things to note about that trajectory. The first is how low the trajectory needs to reach by 2050 compared to current levels, and the rate at which that reduction has to occur. And the second is that the modelling suggests that most of that reduction will occur beyond the year 2030. That's not to suggest that we have time to wait in order to make the emissions reductions, but it reflects the time that will be needed to develop the technology and make the investments in order for those reductions to start occurring and be rolled out across the industry. Next slide, please. So there are three main technology pathways to reduce these emissions. So the first of those pathways is around the decarbonisation of the electricity supply. Now this has occurred for some aluminium producers, while for other aluminium producers it requires substantial changes from the current situation and significant investments. The second pathway is around reducing the direct emissions in the production process. This includes technologies such as inert anode, but also alternatives to fossil fuels in generating thermal heat needed in alumina refining. And the biomass options being pursued by CBA are an excellent example of the sort of reductions that can be made here. And the third pathway is around recycling and resource efficiency, which by improving levels of performance here, we can reduce the overall need for primary metal. As outlined earlier, it's pleasing to see that CBA, as one of IAI's members, is making significant progress on all three of these pathways, and progress will be needed on all pathways in order to achieve the global outcomes. Next slide, please. So just drawing together a couple of the themes of the presentation, one around the demand for sustainable products, and secondly around low carbon aluminium. It's worth considering the carbon status of the current global aluminium supply. So this graph captures both primary metal and metal that is made from recycled material. So about 21% of the metal that's currently sold to the marketplace is primary metal produced from hydro or renewable power, and this can be considered low carbon. A further 20% is produced from post-consumer recycling, which can also be considered nearly zero carbon. A further 15% comes from pre-consumer recycling, where there is debate about the carbon status of that, but it is often considered low carbon, with the remaining coming mostly primary from coal and gas, which can be considered high carbon emitting sources of aluminium. So what we can see is that there is an existing supply of low carbon aluminium. CBA is an example of that, but there's also an increasing demand for low carbon aluminium. And as that demand for low carbon aluminium increases, it will get to the point where it meets or exceeds the available supply, and we'll start to see a stronger signal in the marketplace for low carbon aluminium. And that stronger signal may lead to particular criteria around market access or particular contractual arrangements, or perhaps even price premiums, which will occur naturally over time as demand for low carbon aluminium increases. Next slide, please. So just drawing together some of those points, there are significant opportunities for aluminium industry to seize with the changes that are occurring around sustainability, because aluminium is part of the sustainability solution, largely driven by the natural advantages of aluminium over other materials, such as lightweight and recyclability. But for any producer to grasp those opportunities, they must demonstrate that their production is itself sustainable. And a critical part of demonstrating sustainability is to decarbonise supply chains, with zero carbon electricity and recycling two of the most important pathways to get to that outcome. As the global body for the aluminium industry, we are pleased to see our member companies like CBA making the investments and implementing the technologies that will continue to position aluminium as a material of choice. Thanks very much for the opportunity to talk to you, and I look forward to the chance to participate in the question and answer session. Thank you.
Because now we're going to begin the Q&A session, and now will really require a lot from the moderator because we already have many questions. And of course, you can also continue to send your questions through the chat on the platform. I'll start off with you, Luciano. We have a question from Edgar Pinto from Itaú BBA. He says, could you talk about more about how you compare the ROIC and margins from the recycling business versus the primary business? Do you have any estimate about the capex per ton for each of these? Great, Edgar. Thank you for the question. First of all, just a quick disclaimer, it really depends on your investment, where you are, and what efficiency you have in each of these processes. But in major numbers, if we were to mention, it would be the following. The recycling business normally has an EBITDA margin that's relatively stable, between 10 and 20%. We talk about this a lot. Of course, it depends on each reality a bit, but that's because you buy the metal, which is currently scrap, at a percentage worth of the LME. Of course, it depends on the quality of the scraps and the level of contaminants, and you process this and you sell an aluminum product that's an LME plus premium. So you always have this margin because you're basically buying and selling the same product. In a primary aluminum business, you produce with all the raw materials, and then you have a price that's set by the commodity, where you have more volatility than in the case with recycling. So in our vision, a recycling business can offer returns that are just as attractive as a primary aluminum, sometimes above 15% tier, which is a number we search for normally here. And we believe this is an investment that's very attractive. But of course, it really depends on your efficiency and how you invest, and of course, how you are capable of capturing the scrap in a competitive way in your productive process, and of course the technical aspects in the production cycle. But conceptually, this is what's backing up our decision, and this is why I've tried to invest more in this sector. When it comes to capex, we've seen this change a lot. So I'll give you some numbers here, but don't be limited to them because of course they could vary. It's been a long time since we've had major expansions in primary aluminum in the Western market. There's a lot of investments in China, but not in the Western market. So in the Western market, the last reference we have is in the Arab world in 2018, which was about $4,000 to $5,000 per ton. It could be a little more than this because of the inflation, but a recycling business will normally require capex that varies from 1,000, 1,500, sometimes $2,000 per ton. It depends on the efficiency, but you can see that the capital intensity is a lot lower in one business compared to the other. So I think these are the main points I wanted to share. Thanks for the question again. Great, very good. Thank you, Luciano. Now I'm going to ask Leandro something. This is a crucial topic in this entire discussion. Leandro, how has CBA been working with decarbonization discussions with suppliers? Well, thank you, Sonia, for this question. It's a great question. And of course, the supply chain as a whole is fundamental in our overall processes for the deployment and the scalability of our positive impacts in our ESG agenda. But our strategy it considers that you'll have the engagement of the supply chain, and we kind of look at this intention of engaging the supply chain in a program within the governance lever. And it's a program that is called Sustainable Supplies. And within this umbrella of sustainable supplies, we try to engage our suppliers more according to the ESG criteria in a broader way, including decarbonization issues. So this is a very robust program, and it's subdivided in 7 sub products. And of course, these go through the assessment phases for the performance of the supplier, and then the qualification of the supplier in the ESG criteria. And one of the criteria for the suppliers that are carbon intensive is, of course, measurement and advancing in the decarbonization of its supply chain. And then going through other programs such as preparing partnerships so that these suppliers can develop themselves. And of course, it's very important to mention that when we structured this program, the idea was to not only support our suppliers in this pathway for the deployment of the ESG aspects and decarbonization, but also to bring opportunities for business that are win-win scenarios. Decarbonization with our suppliers, it also means efficiency for us and for them. So we're considering this in our business perspective, where the search for the development and evolution in ESG aspects needs to be connected directly to efficiency. So, based on the assessment of these suppliers, we identify where the gaps are. Then we try to create partnerships with them so that we can search for ways to have better business conditions in the decarbonization or increases of the percentage or evolution of diversity aspects, inclusion, as well as the reduction of consumption or even improvements in the use of the raw material and efficiency in the use of these raw materials. So it's an agenda that does not intend to in any way assess or dequalify or but to position the supplier at a level of maturity, bring them to a horizon of improvement in this maturity level, but with projects that go beyond ESG issues, but also bring in efficiency, cost reduction aspects. Because at the end of the day, we're talking about the following: implementing ESG, the ESG agenda is very much related to an increase in efficiency, an improvement in management, better results, and this is what we're searching for also at the end of the day. You talked about something that was coming to mind during your answer, which is really the win win scenario. So I think this is what we're talking about when we consider suppliers and we bring the stakeholder that's so important for the entire discussion. Great, Miles. Now we have a question for you. And where are the main bottlenecks for decarbonization in aluminum? Is it in technology, investments, compensation in the overall market? You kind of gave us an overview in your presentation, but could you maybe get into more details about the main bottlenecks or blocks in this process for decarbonization of aluminum?
Thanks, Sonia. Yeah, it's a great question. I guess one of the things we've found in the work that we've done is that the opportunities and the pathways available for companies depend a lot on the situations in which they operate and the technology options that are available. So for many companies, the most difficult challenge in decarbonising is sourcing electricity that is low or zero carbon. Now, obviously, in the situation of CBA, that's an advantage that the operation has, and one that has been used to be able to deliver already low carbon aluminium to the marketplace. So in order to decarbonise further, perhaps the biggest bottleneck or challenge is going to be around the level of investment required. Many of the technologies needed to decarbonise further will require significant changes in energy supply or even the development and implementation of new technology. So the Mission Possible partnership, through the work that they did looking at the decarbonisation strategy for the aluminium sector, estimated that almost $1 trillion worth of investment would be needed globally for the aluminium sector in order to achieve net zero outcomes. So that's a very significant level of investment that would be ordinarily beyond the ability of the aluminium industry to implement in the sort of timeframe available. So finding ways to access that investment and to make those investments viable is probably the biggest bottleneck that the aluminium industry faces. Now, that would be assisted with collaboration with governments and with the investment community, and would also be assisted with a stronger market pull from customers for low carbon aluminium. So I guess all of those factors come into play in order to find ways that we can bring on that level of investment required to achieve those decarbonisation goals.
Thanks, Miles. Whenever I hear collaboration, I always remember SDG 17, right? We never do anything on our own, and it really depends on how we can work in partnership. So thank you so much for your contribution. Well, I have another question from Paola. She's congratulating the company for its initiatives. CBA is really standing out in the market when it comes to certificates for carbon emissions and carbon footprints. But I want to know if you guys have any certifications for decarbonization of products and if you include this in the database of OpenLCA. Thank you, Paula, for that question. The ADP declaration is part of our horizon. We'll probably move towards this direction in the future, but at the moment, we've been focusing more on certain certifications that are a little more specific, such as what was presented by Luciano in the beginning, certification that's more that's broader, and also from a carbon perspective specifically, we've been searching for a life cycle analysis, the audit of the data, partnering with strategic partners so that we can assess alternatives with the use of aluminum when it comes to different materials or even the comparison of the aluminum from CBA and aluminum from other suppliers. So, besides this, we've also recently launched here in the beginning of our dialogue today, where we presented our Alenium seal. And this represents aluminum that's produced with up to 4 tons of CO2 per ton of metal aluminum in the electrolysis phase. And together with the Alenium seal, this certification will demonstrate the carbon footprint in each phase of the productive process, scope 1 and 2. And we've been calling this like the passport for the CBA products. So as we access this passport for a certain product like the ingot, we can identify with the contribution for each process and also what's the aluminum footprint at the end of the day for this product. So the idea with the seal is to provide transparency, have a tool so that our customers can use the Alinium seal and the passport to favor the data about their product performance. So all of the data in this passport are audited by a third party. They and the data is loaded with blockchain technology, which means that um, they are not corrupted or manipulated over time. They have a lot of safety. And currently, they are the certification levels we've been adopting. Of course, EDP is in our radar. And in the future, we can work towards this as well with this technology. So, Leandro, you talked about customers, and I'm going to take advantage of this opportunity to also talk to Jose. So he's the audit coordinator, and he said you talked about the pot lines for industrialized carbon, and he wants you to get into more details about how you achieve this. Well, thank you, Jose. Also, the issue here is the following. CBA has already produced low carbon aluminum, and all of these initiatives for decarbonization that we're implementing at the pot lines with the deployment of the upgrades that intend to reduce by 20% the emissions in this phase. We should be offering to our customers products that are still that have carbon performance that's even better. So, in practical terms, our customers can use the aluminum based on these initiatives that CBA has been adopting individually, such as the upgrade of this technology, or even based on processes and projects, together with what was mentioned by Luciano in the real project, where besides recycling, multi layer packaging will also reduce emissions in the phase for the production of aluminum. So, all of these initiatives that reduce emissions in our aluminum production um, will benefit our customers as they use our aluminum, and they could also benefit their customers as well. Of course, considering that many of them have decarbonization targets, the country also has these targets, so we can offer a better product and maybe even access new markets that may intend to use low carbon aluminum. So more and more these markets have been expanding, and we've seen this movement. But now I have a question for Miles. I have a question from for Rodrigo Cucu, and I want to know if it's possible to achieve multilateral patterns for sustainability in aluminum, and what's the best alternative to have some kind of regulatory fragmentation when you try to establish methodologies and targets that are specific that sometimes diverge. Please, Miles.
Thanks. I'm not entirely sure I understood the question, but I'll have a go at answering that. So, as I understand it, it's about addressing multiple parts of the sustainability agenda. And I think that's one of the impressive things about many of the activities that CBA has taken over recent years, is that they've taken a comprehensive approach to sustainability. So we hear from customers and the public that decarbonisation is the most important issue. But in pursuing decarbonisation, it's important that we also address all the other components of sustainability. And I mentioned some of those in my presentation. And I think it's important that as an industry over time that we have ways that we can measure our performance against each of those various areas, and we're able to track our progress and be transparent with stakeholders and with customers and with the public about our performance on those things. So my apologies if I've misunderstood the question. Please let me know if I've need to say something else.
Thank you, Miles. Thank you for your new comments and consideration. And Luciano, now I have a question for you. This one is very interesting because it's really at the crux of the matter, which it comes from Angela Gutto, and she says, with the constant pressure for cost reductions for raw materials and services as a whole, and adherence to the budget, how can you align the desires and needs of the ESG agenda with this kind of pressure that's conflicting at many times? How do you see this? Well, excellent. Great question. I'm going to explain how CBA thinks about this topic and how we've been working on this. So the first point, this ESG topic is really one of the main pillars in the ESG, in the CBA strategy. So we have one pillar which is growth, another pillar which is improving the competitiveness of the asset, then innovation and partnerships. And this in itself is already demonstrating the importance of this topic and these investments for us, since it is one of the pillars in our strategy. Besides this, we have a methodology to prioritize investments in the company, which intends to find different perspectives for the assessment of these investments. One of these is the financial returns, another is the ESG impact of those investments. And then you have other perspectives as well, of course, the ease in execution, other tactile aspects. But ESG really, from this perspective, has the same significance as the financial returns when we perform this assessment. And then we consider all of the investments we have in a matrix based on these different perspectives. And then a decision to prioritize these investments will consider these different factors, not only ESG, not only the financial returns, but other perspectives also that are very important to us. And this in a certain way will guide us in this investment process. So I think the pathway we found here at CBA is to have this assessment in a fairer way or more correct way to uh, continue to prioritize these investments, of course. But this will depend on how we consider and lead each of these investments and compare them with the benefits for the overall company. But again, it's not only the financial benefits, but other aspects as well. Perfect, Luciana. We're always talking about taking a look at this in a more holistical way. And that's why I mentioned in the beginning that sometimes it's a polemic issue or that people talk about a lot. Like, oh, now I'm under pressure and I'm going to stop my ESG investments. No, this is within a business logic and it needs to be looked at as CBA does. So, very good. And Leandro, a question from Hobson from Condomax. The new CO2 emissions for primary aluminum, do they already have accredited certification, and can we consider them in our studies for carbon footprint? Well, Hobson, yes, thank you for the question. All of the data we disclose, such as the data presented today and those that are presented in our annual report, or even at the TCFD that I would invite you once again to access, are data that's audited and you can use. as an information basis to base your calculation of products for customers. So the answer, of course, is yes. Great. Thanks, Leandro. And now we'll get back to the investments. So, the necessary investments for the decarbonization, will they be available in the required timing? And how can you access this better? Well, I think it's already available, and this is an initial very important point to mention. The financial market developed a lot in the last few years, and now we have very attractive lines or facilities for investments. Even at CBA, if you take a look at the last debt emissions we had in the company, they had an important role in this topic. And I think when you look ahead, the feeling I have is that, first of all, you have a major interest from the investors when it comes to the entire ESG topic and companies that also have this kind of project. But you can feel this not only from the bank market, but also from the financial market as a whole and the investors with this level of interest and also the credit facilities available. So we have many credit facilities available at the moment, but we do expect that in the future, with the development not only of the companies, but overall market, that will have even more credit facilities available. So our expectation is pretty much in this direction, as I mentioned in the previous answer. I understand that most of the investments in the companies today already have this ESG perspective, or at least the impact of these investments in a very organized way and efficient way, so that the investment decisions will always involve this kind of topic. So, having the credit facilities and the market accessing these is very important. Thank you, Luciano. Well, I think we've gone through the main topics and are reaching the end of our session here for Q&A. We talked about suppliers, the value chain, investments, trends in the world. And no doubt the audience really took advantage of this opportunity, but I will have one last question still. And I need to take advantage of Luciano's presence here as the CEO of the company. And this is a question I really liked because it really looks at the future. When we find the ESG dialogues next year, what story do you want to tell or share? Great question, Sonia. So, I think a first point is really the continuity of this path we've been setting and the journey we've been establishing over time. So many targets established for the year, for the long term, and the continuity of this execution is continuing to deliver these targets throughout the next years and being able to sit down here next year and demonstrate the evolution of each of these targets. But more than this, we really do genuinely have an ambition to influence the supply chain and to really become a reference in the market. So, Leandro did talk about our sustainable supplies program, but it's not only about influencing suppliers or customers, but also peers and other companies that are interested in this, because we do have a genuine interest in being more influential in the supply chain and really be used as a good reference in the CSG topic. So, if we can share good stories about this in the future, this will also be very positive for us. And at the end, you've also seen our commitment for certifications we have. We want to fill that slide with even more commitments and certifications, but we have a big challenge, which is keeping up with our position. Over the last few years, we were able to conquer all of these certifications and positions, which are referenced in the market. So we want to keep them active and who knows, maybe add additional ones so we can share more details in this story by next year. Great, that's going to be very positive, and definitely hearing people's testimonies and contributions with the genuine commitment to these is very truthful. So I want to thank Miles for his presence, for all of the reflections, insights, and comments. I want to thank Leandro and Luciano also for the questions and answers, and the questions that maybe haven't been answered. We did get a lot, but since we have time limitations, we'll answer them through our IR website in the next few days. So I want to ask Luciano and Leandro to stick around with us once again because we have a very important announcement to be made. And for this, I will invite Carlo Pereira, the CEO of the Global Compact of the UN. Carlos, welcome to our event, and it's an honor to speak with you, my friend. Hi, Sonia, Luciano, Leandro, and everyone. It's a great honor to be here, and I feel it's a great luxury to have Sonia coordinate this event. One of the greatest authorities when it comes to sustainability in our country. So the news I have to share with a great satisfaction is that we invited Luciano to be our impact leader for SDG 13 related to the climate. So I'm very honored and happy to have been at CBA in the past, at the Grupo Votorantim, and I'm really satisfied to have experienced and been part of this story. And I'm really happy also to. I've always been closely monitoring CBA, and so everything we talk about sustainability issues and ESG aspects, the topic uh, term, everything that's trendy today, CBA has already been doing for a long, long time. And I'm very comfortable to say this and very sure of all of this. And so that's why we invited Luciano, and I want to thank him for having accepted this invitation. So he'll be an impact leadership, which means basically that it's a leader that represents the Global Compact from the UN when it comes to topics related to that specific SDG. So, SDG 13, which considers climate, and of course, we want to, in some ways, celebrate and honor uh, the low carbon aluminum with one of the lowest carbon footprints in the world. And this makes us very proud as Brazilians, no doubt. Thank you so much, Carlo. It's a great pleasure and a huge honor to receive this invitation. And of course, we have huge challenges at CBA and in the overall market, as I mentioned. We have a genuine interest in influencing the entire supply chain, other industries as well. And to really be part of the Global Compact is something that's very important. And it's something that's really in line with what I just mentioned. So, we mentioned here at CBA that the ESG topic is a journey, an ending journey. And uh, having this kind of initiative from the Global Compact and, of course, sharing experiences and exchanging experiences in the best way is fundamental and something that's so important. So please count on me and CBA, and I'll be a active member here of the organization as much as I can. Phenomenal, great. So having Carlo, the CEO of the Global Compact, that's been doing that's making huge difference. Luciano also taking in, and of course there would not be a better way to end this dialogue without than his presence. So thank you so much, and thank you all so much for accompanying us all the way here in this morning that was full of information and inspiration. And we'll be providing the link with this recording for this edition on our YouTube profile on the IR website. And in this QR code, you can also access the annual report at CBA. To give you a little perspective on this content, we're going to watch a video with the main highlights. Thank you so much, everyone, and have a great afternoon. It was an honor to be with you guys and to conduct this conversation. Now we're going to call on the video. CBA's aluminum transforms our lives in many ways, and it goes way beyond the things we use in our day-to-day. We can recycle instead of removing things from the environment. CBA is like an example for other companies so that they can also know how to recycle and have a better world. I think it's important to take care of nature because a lot of the basic requirements we need come from it, like the clean air, water, food. You can't have no energy if not we won't be able to do things. Using solar energy and power is a lot more natural. It doesn't generate pollution in the environment. More diversity, valuing, caring for the environment, Have a conscious use of natural resources is a pathway to have a sustainable business. Do you know how CBA has been working to build a better future for us? Access our annual report and check out the initiatives CBA has been working on, thinking about our future.